We're going to talk about modern SEO, what it is. We'll also be having a look at authority content, what it is, how you can use it to help yourself rank and gain visibility in the search engines over this year and into the future as well. I think I'm quite excited and also a little bit challenged. I'm excited because we get to present in such a great community, but I'm also a little bit challenged by the amount of content that I'm going to try and get across for you. Initially, I had thought that this webinar was going to be an hour-long presentation, so my presentation is an hour long, so I'm going to, and even that was me stripping away down to the bare minimum. So I'm going to move through these slides very quickly, and we'll make sure that the slides are available at the end so you can go back in greater detail. But I've really chiseled away to give you the most important parts that are going to help you rank. So this is a webinar that I tailored for small and medium-sized business owners who are currently doing SEO and probably using the SEM Rush toolkit, and also those who are working with SEO companies. It's good to understand the strategies of what's important to rank in 2015 so you can ask the right questions and ensure that your SEO company is following best practice. And then also for SEOs themselves, it's important for SEOs to keep up to date with what's going on and seeing what other people in the industry are doing. So if you hang around till the end, we'll have a little bit of time for question time at the end, as Victoria said. Drop it into the question box. Make sure you stick around till the end as well. I'll provide you a link to download a couple of things from the presentation. We've got a 20-point authority checklist that you can mark your website against. And also I wanted to give you a link to Google's Quality Raters Guidelines, which was a document we'll talk about and that Google released last year. So I think for SEO, it's important to make sure that you've got realistic expectations of what it can and will provide should you follow down this endeavor. It used to be the holy grail of marketing. It used to be very easy to pick the top 50 keywords that you wanted to rank for, take those keywords, post them into the relevant pages on a site, fire a few links at it, and before you know it, you got some rankings. And because of that ease, I think that's what people used to think, particularly business owners thought it was the holy grail, because they could put $1 into SEO and it was like magic. They would turn that into $5 of profit. So anyone who's had any experience with SEO in the past, or maybe a business owner who's been burnt with SEO, they're usually the ones that have unrealistic expectations. The fact is, today, SEO isn't necessarily for everybody, particularly when engaging an SEO company. Obviously, there's a cost for getting SEO in place in a business, and if you're getting that third party to do it, you need to weigh up and figure out, well, how many additional products and services do I need to sell just to reach break even? If you've got a brand new website and you're selling a $10 widget, you've got to sell a lot of those $10 widgets just to reach break even on your spend with an SEO company. That's why it's great if you're taking SEO in-house and something that you're applying yourself, because then you can sustain and continue to do SEO over a longer period of time. And that's why we love tools like SEM Rush, because it gives you the ability to do your own SEO and get some fantastic results. So SEO has changed, but if you invest into it and follow it the right way and follow Google's best guidelines and practices and what we know, then you can get a great return. But it's not like that heyday where you could just magically pick the keywords you wanted to rank for, and before you know it, with little or no work, you'd be driving hordes of traffic. So I think some of the changes that we've seen, which really has shaped the algorithm as we know it, we see updates like Penguin and Panda and Hummingbird, and there's obviously a whole range of other algorithmic updates that have been rolled out that I haven't named. They're kind of like the three very well-known ones. The takeaway here, though, is just to understand that the algorithm updates are happening quicker. The succession at which they're getting rolled out is getting closer. And that makes it actually harder to exploit little loopholes or quick wins that you find. Sometimes in an industry, when it's brand new and when it's just launching, there's low-hanging fruit, and it's very easy to capitalize on that. But as competition moves into a place and a marketplace starts to mature, that's when it becomes more competitive and more difficult to just get those quick and easy wins. And Google's learnt that over time, and they've realized that they need to really be on the offensive when it comes to fighting spam in the search engines, because they understand their intention is to provide the best user experience for their visitors, and by doing that, then they'll get the visitors to come back, effectively earning the eyeballs, and then that means they can start to sell the advertising space or the space around that service because they're providing such a great service. They can then sell ads, and that's how they make money. So that's why it's so important for Google to make sure that they're always delivering the best and relevant results. So we are going to see these updates roll out quicker, more frequently, and it's going to be harder and harder to cut sort of corners. Now, I think great SEO these days isn't just about great SEO. If we wind the clock back a little bit, we go back to 2004, as I said, you could just do some keyword research on SEMrush and take those keywords, load it into the pages, make sure that Google was able to crawl the pages to get them indexed, fire a few links at it, and before you know it, we would start to get the rankings. But as algorithms evolved, we've started to see those updates now. Now we're seeing a lot more factors come into play when it comes to ranking websites. That's everything from user experience to how quickly sites load to social engagement to the content on the site. And it was interesting actually. Not more than a few months ago, I interviewed Rand Fishkin from the Moz community, and he had talked about some analysis they did on LinkedIn. And in LinkedIn, previously a lot of people used to list SEO as a profession, but he's seen that start to drop away, and now he's seeing SEO is more considered a skill because it's just one of the many things that makes up an online marketer's toolkit. And part of that is because now Google's algorithm encompasses so many different things. That means it's very important for an SEO to be across all of these sorts of things, and means they have to be involved in different teams with different sized organizations. They need to be talking to the web developers, they need to be talking to the content marketers, they need to be talking to the people doing paid search, and then traditional SEO as well. So there's a lot of those moving parts, and an SEO ties all of that together. So understanding then, well, how does the algorithm actually work? Obviously, we don't know the exact system. We don't know exactly what Google's looking for, but over time, Google will leave clues, and we can do a little bit of reverse engineering, and there's people like John Mueller, who's an engineer who talks frequently, and there used to be Matt Cutts, and he used to give some insight. So Google leaks different sort of information. Most recently, there was an important document late last year released, which was Google's quality rating guidelines. And if you haven't read that, as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, at the end of the webinar, I'll give you a link to download that. So it's worth sticking around to get a copy of this and reading it and understanding it. Because what this document is, it's the document that Google gives to its quality raters when they go to do a manual review of a website. They say, here are the rules by which we want you to rank this website. Now, what makes this interesting is Google, typically, the way that they roll out algorithm updates and things like that will often start out with some sort of report or coming out with information saying, hey, we want you to be doing this. And then they get manual implementation of that rule or whatever criteria that they set. And then once they get a good result from that, that's when they roll it into the algorithm. So by looking at documents like this, we can kind of see where Google's headed. We can spot the trends and make sure that we set our SEO up so it really stands the test of time. Now, the biggest thing that really stood out for me when reading this most recent guidelines was this mantra, and you may have heard of the mantra, the EAT mantra, which stands for expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And basically, Google is saying high quality pages need enough expertise to be authoritative and trustworthy on their topic. Now that little graphic that I've got there on the screen, that is a snapshot, and you'll see them throughout the document, throughout this presentation that I've taken from the document, so you can actually get the words straight from Google. But this idea of expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness follows throughout the entire document, so much so that it becomes almost like the trump card. It's the one thing that Google says, a very positive reputation can be the reason for using a high rating for an otherwise medium page. So what does that mean? That means Google's basically saying you can have other factors that aren't quite up to scratch, but will still rate you as a high if your authority is quite high. So that becomes a very interesting insight. Google really is looking for authority, and we're seeing a bit of a buzz around it in the community at the moment. Everybody's talking about this idea of authority, and with good reason, because it gives you this global lift on your website. Once you start to build this authority, and we know this is in the document, so over time it's only going to become more and more important for Google. Eric Schmidt talked about it as well. There's a little excerpt there from his book, and he talked about this idea of, and I'll just jump to the second paragraph there, but the true cost of remaining anonymous then might be irrelevant. Even the most fascinating content, if tied to an anonymous profile, simply won't be seen because of its excessively low ranking. So this is Google saying, hey, unless you're starting to build up your authority, unless we know who is authoring content and who is considered an expert in their niche, potentially we're not going to consider this content as relevant, and potentially you'll get an excessively low ranking as a result. And this is happening because Google doesn't know who to trust. There's so many people out there on the web. How does it determine what is a good bit of information and what's a bad bit of information? A great way to default for them to find out what a good bit of info is if it comes from an expert or an authority. So when this happened, everybody kind of said, okay, well, authorship is the answer. And we all know Google Plus, you could tie, through authorship, you could tie a piece of content to your Google Plus account, and then in the search results, you'd get a little photo next to it. But then Google threw the curveball, and then they killed authorship. And a lot of SEOs in the industry then started to go, well, maybe this whole authority thing and this authorship thing, maybe it's not nearly as important as Google had us believe. And I think don't get thrown off by Google's sort of curveball. Don't be fooled, because Matt Cutts, before he headed off, and John Mueller, both of them have commented that author rank is actually part of their algorithm. So to draw a distinction between the two, authorship versus author rank. Author rank is the actual algorithm behind their calculation to determine whether or not you or your business is considered an expert and an authority in the niche. So that is a little bit different from authorship, which is when you start to assign ownership to a piece of content. So even though authorship may have been killed, author rank is still an important component of the algorithm. The calculation is happening behind the scenes, and as we know from reading the document and other areas in Google that we're coming across, we know that this is only going to gain more momentum. So it's still early days. We don't understand exactly what makes up the algorithm, because the algorithm is always changing. From what we do know is things like engagement, comments, sharing of content, connecting with other authors. These factors are influencing your author rank. And if you imagine it, it's almost like you and your business is getting a score, and that score almost becomes like a multiplier against the other ranking factors. So if you have a higher authority score, it's almost like it gives you a global lift when everything else is multiplied. I'll explain the way it works in perhaps a little bit more detail, and this is again coming from Google's leaked document. And I say leaked in inverted commas. We don't actually know if it's getting leaked or Google's intentionally put it out, because this document has been leaked about 5 times over the past few years. So, but this most recent iteration, the way that it works is there's basically a rating scale, and you can see it there from lowest to highest. And Google has a variety of factors by which they're ranking your website. And the document outlines all of the different factors, and then they get their quality raters to go through the website and rank them on this particular scale. Now, you might have come across something like this, like a manual reviewer will get called in when, let's say, you might have been a little bit aggressive on your link building, or you've done something that's kind of flagged for Google's algorithm that, hang on, some manipulation might be going on here. That's when a quality rater will actually step in and then do some manual reviewing, and then where they'll start to actually rate your site. So think of it a little bit like a scoreboard. Here are just a few of the different criteria, things like if you're lacking expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, if the website is lacking care and maintenance, if there's no main content on the website. So if a page is deliberately created with no main content, use the lowest rating. And you can see there, on the right-hand side of the slide there, they actually rate you based on these different criteria. Now, there are different categories by which they're rating you. So if you just think about it, really all I want you to get here is just the concept. Understand what's going on behind the scenes at a manual level, because then that gives you insight into what Google's going to try and automate. So hopefully it kind of gives you a little bit of that light sort of globe moment. And I think the light globe moment I want you to get here is it's time to update your SEO strategy. If you're using the same tactics that you've been using in the past 3 years or 5 years and you've not really updated anything, you have to update your strategy, because the algorithm is updating. And if you don't update, then potentially you could be doing things that would harm your website. And with that, focusing in on building up your authority, which I'll give you some action items on how you can do that, is a sound investment of your time that will pay long-term dividends because of the direction that Google's heading. So let's actually answer the question, what is modern SEO? So the way that I like to think about it, I'm going to break it into these 3 categories for you. We've got website, content, and sharing. So the website is obviously everything that's happening on your website, and we want to make sure that you're following Google's best practices as they outline over at Webmaster Tools. We want to make sure we have a good, quick loading website. Next, we need to make sure that you've got some good quality content. And the final one is sharing. And sharing, I use the word sharing as opposed to link building just because it can be easier for people to understand, and I don't want you to get caught up in the idea of building links for the sake of building links, because not all links are created equal. By creating great quality content and then sharing it, and there's a few things that you can do to help amplify it, and some traditional SEO tactics that we'll go through still work, but you just don't want to over push it. If we drill down into the website factors, I'm going to break it into 3 main areas. We'll have a look at the technical, on-page, and off-page SEO. So firstly, for the on-page or the technical SEO, if this looks like your website, it's probably time to update your website. If you haven't updated your website in the past 5 years, then most likely it's hurting you. Google just recently has come out with an announcement on the 21st of April. They will be rolling into the algorithm an update that will penalise sites that aren't responsive or mobile friendly, because they know the web is going mobile and they know people are consuming content through mobile devices. So it's important for them to give them a good user experience. So they're very clear in the document the things that they're looking for a modern website. They're looking for pages with functional design. They want to make sure that websites don't look like it's abandoned and hasn't been updated or doesn't have spammy content. That spammy pages is an interesting one. You can see there, and I've underlined it. They should be rated the lowest. So if you have doorway pages on your site, very thin content, pages that are just specifically targeting perhaps your product or your service, and you've added on a geographic term after that keyword, and you haven't really tweaked up the copy, and you might have hundreds of pages all targeting the same thing with very similar content, then that's going to be something that they'll consider spammy type pages. And if you're just not taking care of your website, that's why it's important to make sure you update it. Now, probably the best recommendation that I can give you is find a good website designer who is up to date with their stuff, and you want to make sure that they give you a quick loading website that's responsive and has a great user experience. You can use some tools like Google's got the site speed tester, and I've given you the link there. You can just Google Google Site Speed Tester, type in your website there, and it'll give you some recommendations on how you can speed up your site. It'll also tell you what your user experience like is on a mobile device. That's the one that you want to have a little bit of a look at, particularly with this pending update on the 21st of April. If your website isn't up to speed then there's potential that, particularly on mobile rankings, you'll tend to perform not as well. You can also head over to Google Webmaster Tools, and usually I'll actually ask a website designer. I mean, we design websites over at Melbourne SEO Services, particularly with a focus on the SEO side of things. But we'll ask web designers, and I suggest you ask a web designer if they're following Google's best practice, because very clear. This is a screenshot here from Google Webmaster Tools, and they talk about some of their quality guidelines. You want to make sure that you're not doing linking schemes and there's not irrelevant keywords on pages and scraped content. And I mean, these are just some of the things, and I suppose specifically targeting in on SEO, but they also give guidelines around the actual website themselves. At the end of this webinar, I've got two things I was going to give you. I'll give you a copy of the Google leaked document, but I'll also give you a 20-point authority checklist that you can go through, and it's pretty much something that you'll just go to your web designer as they're designing your website and say, hey, can we just make sure that we have these things in place? I think it's quite important that your website, if it hasn't been updated, let's say in the last 3 or, I mean, if it's more than 5 years, it's time that you update and you get it looked at, because potentially it'll be hurting your rankings. Still on the topic of website, we need to make sure your on-page optimization is correct. Google talks about in that document, they say pages with the intent of luring search engine users rather than providing meaningful content should be rated the lowest. So that's basically them saying if you're keyword stuffing and you're doing something purely for the purpose of manipulating the rankings, then you want to rank them very low, and accordingly that'll make your rankings suffer. So what does good on-page SEO actually look like? It's just the traditional stuff, and you probably already know it. You need to have a core keyword list, and I would get a spreadsheet and dump in all of your product names, your brands, your company names, staff names, all that sort of stuff. Dump it all into a spreadsheet. Just do a big brain dump. Then go to Google, start typing some of those keywords into Google search, and you'll notice the predictive text. That's the image at the bottom of the slide there. I've typed in Melbourne SEO Services, and then you could basically pick up some of the other phrases there: SEO agency, SEO providers, Melbourne SEO Services YouTube. Dump all that stuff into a spreadsheet. Similarly, the searches, the related searches, when you do a search on Google, have a look right down the bottom. And of course, you can't go by not using SEMrush. So you use all of these tools as a way to build up a big keyword list. Once you've got that keyword list, you just want to prioritize it. Just looking for keywords with a variation in competition levels, commercial intent, as long as you've got some way that you're being a bit data driven on the way that you select your keywords. And then you use a tool like Screaming Frog, which basically crawls your website so you know all of the pages that you can work with. You dump all of that data into a spreadsheet just like this, and now you've got a spreadsheet that contains the URL, the titles, the descriptions, and the meta keywords. And basically, it's a matter of pairing up from your keyword research. Each page should get one keyword, and then you pop it in the relevant places. So, and I'll whip through this just because this is classic, good old SEO. You take one keyword. You don't want to have a page that optimizes or over-optimizes for many keywords, but at one keyword per page, you might have a couple of variations of that keyword, but you don't want to go much more than that. You make sure that that keyword is in the title, description, and also in the body content as well. But always put the user first. Don't try and stuff in a keyword for the sake of putting in a keyword. If the keyword doesn't fit, don't squish it in there just for the sake of it. And then the final bit we need to look at is off-page SEO. So when we're thinking about getting all of your website right, if you think about this, this is almost like about cleaning up your own room and making sure that everything's clean and tidy. You've got a good website that's technically sound. You've got great on-page SEO, and now we just want to clean up our link profile if we've done some things in the past. So some old SEO strategies can potentially hurt you. It used to be that bad links couldn't hurt you, but these days now Google wants you to take ownership, and they're giving you tools like the disavow tool as a way to own up and fess up if there are particular links that you feel that you didn't create or you would like to not have part of your link profile. So even if you don't have a penalty yet, it's my recommendation that you still go through and have a look at your link profile. You can do that using Google Webmaster Tools, or just work with a good SEO provider, and they can kind of have a look at your link profile and make sure that it's up to speed. You want to make sure that all of your ducks are lined up and you've got everything all set up, so once you start to build on this, you haven't built a house of cards that could potentially come tumbling down because of something you've done in the past. And then it's just a matter of Google wants you to do some reputation management. They really want you looking after your reputation, and they pop that in the guidelines as well. They talk about their guide that they want their quality raters to search around the web and look for independent, credible sources of information, and you can see their reputation is an important consideration when using the high rating. So they're actually recommending that people go off their quality raters to search around the web to see what sort of references that you've got. So that's the links. And Google, they really they understand where they play in the whole scheme of things when it comes to a buying decision. Where Google is strongest, they have a thing they call the zero moment of truth, and that's the moment just before you're about to make a purchase, when you go to Google and then you do some keyword research, or you do some research around the product or service to try and find some reviews and forum feedback, ratings, feedback, that sort of information. They want you to have a look at that sort of information and keep an eye on it, because they know that's really what people do when they come to Google. So at this point in time, thinking about your website, this is the time to think, how do you actually stand up? How does your website place in those three areas? Because failure to have any of those areas quite strong and solid can cause negative rankings or lower rankings, excessively low rankings. And if you think about it this way, sometimes you might do some analysis on your competition. You're using some different tools like SEMrush, and you're having a look at your competition, and then you go, wow, this domain here seems to rank higher than me, but they've got less links and they've got all of these less traditional SEO factors that you would have thought, hang on, by rights, my domain name is a stronger domain name than them, but for some reason they keep on outranking you. And that could be because you've got a low user experience and your actual website doesn't follow those best practices, so it's downgrading the quality of your links, or you're getting a low score, so when that's actually multiplied out, it's causing those low rankings. So that's why you need to make sure you've got all of these things in place. And then once you've got your website sound, that's when you move into content. And I feel like content marketers, they kind of get it wrong because they just focus on creating great quality content, but they don't think too much about SEO. And I think a lot of SEOs have it wrong because they think about SEOing every piece of content, but they're not really thinking about putting great content out there. So that's where we developed, and I coined the term authority content. And authority content is basically the act of consistently creating and distributing helpful information and stories to gain the attention, engage, and influence a clearly defined audience, with the objective of being to identify those who could benefit from your products and services. Now, I understand that's a little bit of a mouthful, so let's try and unpack it a little bit. Basically, it's about creating good, helpful content. So here's a client of ours, they're a cosmetic surgeon, and we help them to shoot a whole lot of frequently asked questions around different questions that people would ask before considering getting some sort of cosmetic surgery. And we're doing something similar with a horse supplies company that we're working with. We're creating a whole bunch of content around horse health care. So you want to think about what's relevant to your target market, what would be helpful for them. And then we want to be consistent. Once we create that content, you want to be consistently putting it out across the web. It's not enough to do just one bit of content. That's why I love seeing what SEMrush is doing at the moment with all of these webinars. They're being consistent. They've got a whole bank of different webinars that are all queued up and going to happen over a long period of time, and this is a long-term play for them. So what you want to be doing is thinking the same thing. You want to be thinking about how can you create good, consistent content. And when you do that, that's when you capture people's attention, you start to get them to engage in your content, and you start to build trust with them. So that's really what it's all about. Get their attention through some smart SEO, get their engagement because you're putting out great quality content, and build that trust because you're doing it consistently. Now for us, we always start our content creation with video. I feel like video is a bit of a low-hanging fruit right now, so much so that as Victoria mentioned, we started Melbourne Video Production because we believe in video so much. And I think every company really needs to think about being a media company because it's such an important component to marketing online right now. I think if you don't have a content strategy, you really don't have an SEO strategy. And video is a great place to start just because of the way that it can be repurposed. The fact is, the predictions are by 2018 that 3/4 of all consumer traffic will be in the consumption of video, which is huge. I mean, if you think about positioning yourself in front of the trend, this is a huge trend that you want to make sure that you get in front of. We use a process we call authority content to create this type of content. And you can find out more about it over at authoritycontent.com. But what we found with Melbourne SEO Services was when we're working with clients, sometimes it was hard to get content from them because they were too busy doing the day-to-day of their business, delivering their products and services, and it was a bit like getting blood from a stone. So what we did is, using this process we call authority content, we developed a 3-step method for quickly developing as much content as we can, just like I said with the cosmetic surgeon or the horse supplies company, or most recently we've done it with a pool manufacturer, where we'll go in, we'll capture a whole bunch of content all in one go, then we take that content and we chop it up into pieces and we share it around the web over a period of time. So it's been something that's been very successful for us as we start to roll it out. But that's kind of what you need to think about. You need to think about getting a good solid website, and then you need to think about having great quality content. And then the final piece, once you've got that content, is we need to think about how to share it. Where are we going to place this to earn links? And there's a variety of different ways. There's a little snapshot there from authority content, and it depends on different industries. But just to give you a real basic framework that you can follow, the best thing that you do once you've got good, rich content, it's great to start with posting it on your website. You want to follow those best practices for optimizing content as I talked about, and you want to be consistently posting things. You want your website to be the hub. When you start syndicating content, the whole purpose really of syndicating that content is to build up your authority and get people to come back to your website so they can get into your funnel so you can then continue to market to them. So once you create a bit of content and you post it on your website, then you want to email your database. If you've got one, over time you should be looking to grow one, but email them first so you can get some initial engagement in the content that you're putting out there on the web. And then you want to start to share it socially. I recommend that you should probably have a profile on each of those top 4 that I've got there: YouTube, Google+, Facebook and Twitter. Some of the other social media platforms underneath, it really depends on your target market. I don't think it's right for every business to play in every space, but if you're looking for business professionals, then playing in LinkedIn is probably good for you. If you're looking for housewives between the ages of sort of 25 to 45, then Pinterest could be a good place to stay for you. If you want to get in front of teenagers between the ages of 16 and 23, then go play over on Snapchat. So just have a little bit of a think about where your target market happens. Now, just by doing this, creating great quality content, SEO optimizing it, and then syndicating it consistently, SEO will start to happen naturally. You'll start to earn great quality links. we will still supercharge it a little bit more, but that's where you want to start with your SEO strategy, and then we start to get into the more fancy tactics. Just remember though, just like when you optimize content on your website, you want to be optimizing content whenever you share it out. You want to make sure you pick a keyword and you put it in the title, description, and in the relevant places, regardless of if you're posting it on YouTube or if you're posting it on, you know, if it's going to be on Google Plus or Twitter, then just make sure you're using hashtags and things like that. So here's a little video that I was optimizing that did quite well from a song that I actually sang at for my wife, because I often run little experiments, and this was from our wedding, and this particular video did extremely well. Basically, the takeaway here is any bit of content that you put out there, select a keyword, where there is a title, a description, and a tag, make sure that you pop the keyword in those relevant places. And like always, just make sure that you think about the user first. And then once you start to share content out there, this is when some of the more traditional SEO link building can come into play. That's when you want to amplify your winners. So as you start posting consistent content out there, you monitor which bits of content are getting the most engagement. So you might post a video on YouTube and or 10 videos on YouTube, and one of those videos happens to get 5 times as many views than any of the other videos. So for that content, you know that there's a good message to market match, and they're the things where you want to start to then do PDF sharing sites and press releases, infographics, guest posts, and those sorts of things to amplify that content. Now, I know sometimes when I talk about strategies like that, people say, yeah, but Matt Cutts said that guest posts are dead, or you don't want to be doing this type of link building, or that, you know, press releases are dead. The real key to think about here is what Google's trying to target is low quality, spammy, manipulative links. So if it's a manipulative guest post and it's very low quality and the whole purpose is just to get a link, then yes, Google wants to target that sort of stuff. But if CNN came to me tomorrow and said, hey, we want to give you a guest post on the home page of CNN, I'm not going to say to them, hey, no, I don't want to do that because Matt Cutts said that, that they're targeting guest posts and that's considered spammy content. So I think quit thinking that a particular method is dead unless its sole purpose is for manipulating the rankings. If it actually adds value, then it can be a good SEO strategy. So when you follow these processes, this is kind of what leads to the internet being a utopia. It's where you've got a great website with great content that you've shared around the web, and that's really the way that the internet was meant to be. You can see like the real world application of this if you head over to my YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/the SEO method, and you can see this is just the front of my funnel, because we've got quite a few different ways. You know, we're syndicating across multiple different platforms. But over the past year, and I took this snapshot literally just before the webinar, but we've had close to 1 million minutes watched. Can you imagine that? Having 1 million minutes of content that pre-sells my products and services, and YouTube is now actually our 3rd biggest referrer back to our website. And you can see there the number of views, just over 250,000 views. That type of goodwill and value that you're adding to the community because we put out great quality content, that's what pre-sells people. That's what earns you great sort of authority in the marketplace, and then Google rewards you, and that sort of flows through the rest of your website. So in the tail end of the webinar, I'll just sort of come sort of full circle and finish with a little bit of a story. This gentleman here taught me a lot about viral videos. He's a 19-year-old, super smart Romanian engineer that partnered with someone here in Melbourne, Australia, and the project was to build a life-size Lego car powered by air. And you can actually see there's a photo of me sitting on the car. Now this project, you may or may not have seen it, but if you Google it, you'll definitely find it because it was picked up by over 150 media outlets. It had over 4 million views in the first 30 days. It was a fantastic project for me to be involved in. You can see it just there. It had worldwide coverage, and it was great being at the center of all of that. But my lesson there was viral videos don't make you rich. Just getting a video that has 5 million views is not going to make you rich. I make 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times more money by consistently putting out my authority content, dripping out good quality content that's targeted for my target market, and dripping it out over a period of time, and then amplifying the ones that are winning. Now, not every bit of content you put out there is going to be a home run. Some are going to be better than others, but it's about being consistent and then doubling down on those that are doing very well. So I suppose that kind of brings us to the tail end, and we talked about a lot, and I squashed a lot in there for you, so you probably want to have another listen to the webinar and check out the slide deck and follow through. But a lot of thought went into this, and I know if you apply these strategies, it's just good, solid online marketing and SEO that'll stand the test of time. We talked about EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. I'm telling you now, that's where Google is going, and it'll be just a matter of time before we see an algorithm update that's centered around authority. Mark my words, once that rolls out, it'll be interesting to see what furry animal people decide to name that particular algorithm update, but it will come, and you just want to make sure that you start building that now. And to do that, you want a very solid website that follows best practice. You want to make sure that you've got good on-page SEO, and also make sure you've got a clean off-page SEO profile. You create some great quality content, and you can follow the process over at authoritycontent.com. So to create high quality content that you then share out across the web. When you do that sharing, you make sure you SEO every piece of content. You find that SEO starts to happen naturally if it's good content, and it's a very effective way for doing it. And then you start to apply some traditional SEO over the top, which really magnifies the result. And that's how you create an excellent, long-lasting stream of traffic through to your website. It's the difference between good and bad SEO. I mean, everybody's come across the dodgy SEO that kind of makes you feel a little bit like, ooh, this is gaming the search engine, or potentially is this going to come back to bite me? This is not some spammy, low-quality links. This is not about blog networks. This is not about comment spamming. This is about good, high-quality content. So as I talked about some goodies at the end, you can head over to melbourneseoservices.com/goodies, and from there you'll be able to download a free copy of my 20-point authority checklist. Every website should be following that, and you can handball that to your web developer just to make sure that you've got the basics covered. And there's also, once you grab that from the goodies page as well, you can get a copy of the quality guidelines, which is worth reading because it tells you basically what Google is looking for.